or parks or wherever he was doing those investigations with the, that he was good at. We heard that testimony too. Anyway, completely unrelated in terms of constitutional jurisprudence. It's obviously pretext. It's an unlawful order under the Constitution. It's unlawful under the county's own code. It's unlawful to even rely on that in terms of dismissing it because it came in after the investigation was unlawfully reopened. And that's all I have to say on that part. And I'll turn the rest of this over to you.
Kenny, I'm glad you got that off your chest when you did, because I'm afraid you might have just blown up. Bottled up over there. I might have gotten confused there in the middle. Would you mind reading that back to me?
You want the theatric?
Just the facts, ma'am. Okay.
Thank you very much.
I don't mean to make light of it.
That's
the context of the substance, just the context.
Thank you very much, Lord. I appreciate your time and your patience throughout this process. This has been very long. It's been long for everyone, and certainly for all sides. This is a policy change. You heard it from Mr. Rickman. This is a policy change. This is a change in the direction of the beach department. And you heard him say he does not agree with the policy that adults should be able to date off duty. And that's certainly understandable. A lot of county government agencies, city government agencies, they have what they call anti-fraternization policies, and that's not uncommon. And if you wanted a policy change, this is probably a good case to show, hey, maybe you should have a different policy. And maybe that's his thinking, and he's made it and very candidly admitted that's what the direction that he's headed. And unfortunately, that's not the standard that you apply to employees who, when there's not that policy, it doesn't exist. If you want to change the policy, there are very specific ways you do it. You don't start disciplining employees for conduct that you haven't instituted yet. They call, when you've got that's called a policy failure. You've heard quite a bit of testimony about what is a policy failure. In fact, Mr. Director Sweat said, I told Mr. Kaufman when we had that meeting, before the notice of intent, the original was raised, that this, he discussed with him what's called a policy failure. You don't like the conduct, then let's go create a policy, and let's go ahead and get everybody acting in accordance with that policy. But that hadn't happened yet. And of course, Mr. Rickman hasn't done it yet either. So with respect to Captain Gardner, you can understand when he made his decision, it was from the mindset of, this isn't the policy I like. I don't agree with Director Sweat's policy of where you can date among each other, and I don't agree with your being able just to separate by zone. He's very clear with that. And the 6 days that he took to review all of this and make that decision, that was clear and foremost in his mind. But let's talk about the actual policies that are still in place at the beach and the conduct which is acceptable under that. Director Sweat was very clear that employees can date among each other. Off-duty, adult. What you heard a lot of testimony about is that the county like you to believe that all of this pressure that they were under should result in and be the basis of a dismissal of Captain Gardner because they were under scrutiny from criminal acts. These are adults who have had sexual acts with children. And while they would give some lip service to, well, that's not really what we mean about Captain Gardner, it's the feature of their case. The feature of their case is that's the same kind of conduct. You should go ahead and punish them for what these criminals did. You need to hold that against Captain Gardner. In this case, you heard a lot of testimony, and if we look at the notice of dismissal, you recall the first day, well, yesterday, probably like to forget it at this point, but yesterday, all of the witnesses came before you were very clear. When you talked about eyewitnesses, people that were actually, who work on the beach, Officer Etheridge, Officer McDaniel, Officer Gittner, Officer Winters. When you looked at those persons and Director Sweat, every one of them told you that Captain Gardner acted professionally that he did nothing inappropriate at work. He never put either any of them in a compromising position, that they were clear that he was not their direct supervisor. Director Sweat was very clear about that, and I think even the board asked him questions and asked him very specifically about that particular issue. They also, Director Sweat was candid about, I don't know that he ever lied to me. And Director Sweat is the person who has the best knowledge, notwithstanding Mr. Rickenwald's belief that he knows better. Director Sweat was there. He asked the question. He knows the context that question was asked in, and he knows exactly what their basis, what Captain Gardner and Director Sweat, their relationship. He would be the best one to tell you if he thought he was being dishonest, and he told you, he was candid with you, I don't know, I don't have any belief, any reason to believe he was untruthful with me. He said, I made him, if I wanted to know, I made a mistake, I should have asked him, have you been dating her? Or come tell me. And he agreed that had he asked that, he had no reason to believe that Captain Gardner would not have told him that. He admitted to that. He was very candid with that. That when you look at the claims that are made specifically related to this claim that, well, yes, you're not a direct supervisor, because we're dealing with an unwritten policy now. We're outside the policy, and we're dealing with something that's really a practice whom no one in the history of Volusia County has ever received any penalty or investigation of. That's what we're dealing with now. We've gone from no penalty, no investigation, to you are fired. That's how quick this has happened. So when we're dealing with that, we're dealing with this unwritten policy. You recall Captain Maris said how it worked, that there are times when, like it or dislike it, officers that are in relationships may end up in a position where they oversee, they supervise each other. And the example that was used was Captain Green and Officer McGinty. That's a very possible, probable, and will most likely occur over the summertime. They're going to cover each other in cases, and they should. And that circumstance is no different than the circumstance that was presented here. You've got an officer who has a direct supervisor, which is not Captain Gardner, but she was assigned not by Captain Gardner, requested as they suggest to you, but Director Sweat said, I'm the one who allowed her to go volunteer with investigation. And yes, if she's in front of him and yes, he may give her some direction and have some control, but it's the same exact scenario. And if you recall, Captain Maris said, yeah, it's the same thing, like it or dislike it. That's the same conduct that we accept on a daily basis. We have accepted, and we continue to accept it today. Until the policies are changed, that's what it is. And we don't change them by deciding one day, we're just going to fire somebody and call it conduct which reflects unfavorably. When you look at these charges, these aren't specific policy charges. These charges are generic up to this issue related to the violation of this order. You take that one's been covered, I'm going to beat that horse. But let's deal with the other one. None of them are specific. There's actually a section, all of the policies, the disciplinary rules of the police department are set out, and they are very specific as to each bit of conduct. There's policies, and it goes through. The only one they cite is 110105, neglect of duty. If you get an opportunity to look at that, that's not even a policy violation. That's a classification. There are policies underneath it that go for about 4 pages. None of it falls underneath it. All they do is cite to you, it's actually a definition of a classification. And if you go underneath it, you will see very specific conduct which are classified as neglect of duty. And there's not a single one of those. It's just a general classification. General policies. We're changing the policy of the beach. We're not going to do it through the changes in the policy making provisions. We're going to do it by conduct of firing officers, disciplining officers, until we think they can figure out what it is we want to do. That's where this case has always been going. It's the way that it started, and it's the way that it's going. We talked, and I know that I've been very adamant as it related to